Good morning. Welcome to House Labor, Health and Social Services Committee. Good morning again. Staff, good morning, and members of the public, welcome. We adjourned from our House session at 2 a.m. this morning. So not much sleep, give us a little grace, but I am very thankful to have a strong and full committee here this morning that's ready to work these two bills that we have on the agenda. So this meeting is called to order at 8 a.m. And Mr. Caldwell, if you would call the roll.
Representative Clouston.
Here.
Representative Guggenmoss. Representative Heft.
Here.
Representative McCann.
Here.
Representative Ottman.
Here.
Representative Thayer. Representative Wasserberger. Representative Yen. Chairman Rodriguez-Williams. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Again, welcome members that are joining us in the audience today and online. I will go over a few of our rules regarding decorum during our committee meeting here. Members, speakers, and audience members will conduct themselves in a civil and respectful manner at all times during our legislative meeting. Speakers, I ask that you address all comments and questions to the chairman. Speakers will refrain from the use of individual names. Comments will be directed to the issue under consideration, and any testimony that strays afar from the topic will be called out of order. Speakers will refrain from making comments of a personal nature that reflect upon the character or conduct of a committee member or another speaker. Personal criticism, ridicule, and name-calling is forbidden. Speakers will refrain from the use of indecent or obscene language, fighting words, or any other language which is disruptive to the orderly discussion of the meeting. Time limits for addressing the committee meeting may be imposed depending on the committee's agenda and the number of presenters. This morning, again, we have two bills that the committee will consider. We have House Bill 143 that we'll hear first and House Bill 129 that we'll hear second. Committee, I will now move House Bill 143, free speech for healthcare providers. It's now on the table for consideration. The bill sponsor is Representative Ottman, and Representative, you have a co-presenter, so come on up. Good morning. If you would state your names, and then we'd love to hear the bill.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Committee. Pepper Ottman, House District Representative for District 34.
And Greg Chaffwin, Senior Legal Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom.
Okay. Madam Chairman and Committee, today I want to introduce House Bill 143, also known as Free Speech for Healthcare Providers Act. This bill protects the fundamental rights of healthcare professionals in our state, rights that are enshrined in both the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and Article 1 and Section 20 and 21 of our Wyoming Constitution. The bill arises from a simple and important principle. The state should not interfere with free speech rights of healthcare professionals. This preserves their freedom to speak with patients according to their oath to do no harm without fear or discrimination. Under HB 143, no state agency, department, board, or commission may discriminate against a healthcare provider for engaging in speech or expression that is legally protected. It does not apply to speech that clearly and directly causes physical harm or mental harm to a patient within the last 3 years. Protecting the freedom to discuss the risks and benefits of different medical procedures increases access to quality care. For that reason, doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals should be protected when they speak about practices or methods of treatment that may harm patient health and safety. Respecting and encouraging free speech leads to better healthcare For patients, integrity is vital to the practice of medicine and requires the ability to speak freely. Protecting freedom of speech for healthcare professionals safeguards their integrity and helps ensure the availability of quality healthcare. HB 143 defines discrimination, including adverse licensing actions, reprimands, loss of privileges, or termination related to protected speech. It also clarifies who is covered, from physicians and nurses to pharmacists and therapists and other professionals who participate in healthcare. It also requires timely notice about complaints or adverse licensing actions connected to their protected speech. HB 143 creates a private cause of action, allowing professionals to be made whole if their rights are violated. This bill does not limit the state or medical board's ability to protect patients from harmful conduct. Rather, it ensures that the protected speech of Wyoming's medical professionals is respected and not subject to arbitrary or unconstitutional discipline. For expressing viewpoints or providing guidance that is protected speech, this bill is strong. It fosters an environment where open communication is encouraged and where providers and patients alike are treated with respect and fairness under the law. For these reasons, I respectfully ask your support for advancing House Bill 143.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Oppen. Mr.
Thank-
Schaefer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. At Alliance Defending Freedom, we analyze laws that affect constitutional freedoms, and we have represented medical professionals whose careers have been threatened and they face serious consequences from state action because their free speech rights were not adequately protected. One such professional is Dr. Alan Josephson, who spent decades as a psychiatrist, who lost his position and then endured years of litigation simply for raising concerns about doing gender procedures on minors. Another is Kaylee Childs, who's a licensed counselor in Colorado who has open conversations with her clients, but she was forbidden from practicing in certain areas unless she agreed with the state's particular viewpoints. Those stories just raise the growing problem of healthcare professionals being forced to hide their sincerely held religious or ethical beliefs or risk losing their jobs altogether. Now, that's not only a disservice to them, but it's also a disservice to their patients and to their own communities. This bill works in practice. It protects conversations between healthcare professionals and their patients by ensuring just that state agencies don't target protected free speech. It enforces already existing constitutional protections. It applies to state action, not private employers, and it preserves the state's authority to regulate the practice of medicine. That's medical conduct, which is different from the free speech. It doesn't change standards for malpractice or negligence, and it explicitly excludes speech that leads to harm. We know that it's well tailored and that it works in practice. There are 5 other states that already have this kind of protection, including Florida, Tennessee, Idaho, and Montana. Free speech protections obviously are good for the doctors, but it's also good for the patients. It helps them find a doctor that they can know and trust, because part of that means having open conversations so that they can find doctors they can trust and set goals and not have a one-size-fits-all approach to medicine. This open conversation is good for the patients. It's also good for the practice of medicine itself. We know that open discussion and ethical scrutiny is very important in the development of scientific progress. This requires questioning, debating, and refining new approaches as they come up. And to have that, you need free speech rights. So I think this piece of legislation is good for doctors, it's good for patients, and it's good for the practice of medicine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, committee, any questions of the bill sponsor? Representative Yen.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Apologies for being late. Mr. Schaefer, do you think this speech protects, do you think this bill protects speech from doctors who are talking about reproductive health care? Because frankly, I think that's what's under attack in this state. I don't think anyone's going to stop the kind of speech that you've mentioned. So I'm curious on whether you think it would protect against speech around reproductive health care.
Thank you for the
Did you
question.
direct this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, it was to Mr. Schaefer.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer.
Madam Chair, so as I mentioned in my comments, conduct is different than speech. So commenting about procedures of any sort, talking with people about one's views and viewpoints is protected speech. Now, conduct of doing procedures is something that states can regulate. And even conduct, speech that is incidental to conduct can be regulated. Informed consent and risks and benefits to procedures, that's where the free speech line is drawn. So it's important to know that this bill does nothing to change what the free speech protections are. It just recognizes that healthcare professionals need to be respected from state action that would interfere with free speech rights, which is different than the conduct that can be regulated.
Committee, further questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you both. Don't go far. All right. Are there any government agencies that would like to testify on House Bill 143? Please come forward. Good morning. Please state your name and we'll hear your take on the bill.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Kevin Bonneblust, Executive Director of the State Board of Medicine, licenses and regulates the practice of medicine by MDs, DOs, and PAs. And I'll try to keep my voice down because I know you're all kind of running on empty right now. So anyway, thank you for being here. I don't really have a lot to say because who's against free speech? I mean, it's great, right? I mean, we're all for free speech. And I think that in some ways, this is a solution sort of in search of a problem here in Wyoming. I'll give you some examples within the Board of Medicine. Let's get one of them right out on the table, and that's the whole world of COVID. And there was discussion of hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, things like that. The Board of Medicine never took a single action against a single licensee because of either advising patients to take that or even prescribing it. Not one. Not one. Now, other examples. We had a licensee who got into a verbal tussle online with people who were arguing about whether diets were a good idea. And he opined that, well, if you want the ultimate diet, just take a look at the Auschwitz diet. Every person that went on it lost lots of weight, didn't they? Thought he was being clever, but it was just a horribly, horribly inappropriate thing to say. We get letters from out of state. You must do something about this terrible doctor. He's unbecoming to the profession. The board said, no, he has the right of free speech. No matter how ugly it is, he has the right to free speech. And our board said, no, we're not going to touch this. Another example, you might know that we have a licensee who happens to be a sitting U.S. Senator from our state. He's voted on things like who the Secretary of Health and Human Services is. Not a controversial vote at all, no. And also voted on things like whether or not to change the, for lack of a better term, Affordable Care Act. I'll use the proper term, the Affordable Care Act provisions so that the sweeteners that were put in place in the last administration weren't continued. We got letters saying you must do something. He is harming patients by doing this, harming the body of patients because he's voting this way and this way. And our board looked at it and said, excuse me, but have you all in the rest of the country heard of free speech? That they can say that. No, by the way, there's another little detail in the Constitution called the, oh shoot, now it's escaping me. But basically that when you're on the floor, like you all, you have a certain immunity that you have the speech and debate clause. Thank you. Now I thought of it. And there's that protection as well. This board, the Board of Medicine, has repeatedly declined to crack down on somebody's free speech rights, no matter how much somebody complained about it. So to that end, you can certainly pass this bill, but I don't anticipate it's going to change much. I will say that there are some concerns with where that line gets drawn on what is speech and what has impact on care. And I'm sure there'll be a quick answer to this, but my concern is if somebody says, you know what, you got a cancer that 99% of the time will be taken care of by chemo and radiation. But you know what, I think a pineapple smoothie 3 times a day ought to carry the day. Now that's ridiculous, and I'm making a point here. But here's the thing. They said, I think if you keep seeing me and we do that, I think you're fine. So the patient doesn't do anything but pineapple smoothies and dies. What's the proximate cause of death? Wasn't the pineapple smoothies. It was cancer. So now can the board say, hey, wait a minute, you told this guy to just drink pineapple smoothies and he'd be fine. Now, that's a gray area. I don't know how that pans out under this bill. And I'm not sure there's any way to guide that. just because there's not a bright line always between speech and the treatment and conduct. So I would urge you to be careful with that. And so I think all told, while the idea is right, first off, this is a problem we don't have. You'll note that all the examples cited were from other states. There's not an example from Wyoming. Not that the Board of Medicine has done. I don't believe that the Board of Nursing has done. But here's the last thing. Let's say that, for instance, there's a determination that the Board of Medicine lost. It thought it had a good case, but it lost. And so they were found to have discriminated against this doctor. That's great. Now, by my reading of this bill, that means for the next 3 years, the state hospital cannot require that physicians coming to work for it be licensed by the Wyoming State Board of Medicine. That's the way I read it. And if I'm incorrect, I love it because that's a tangled subsection. But I would say you need to look at that carefully, because if that's the case, what happens then when my friends at the Board of Nursing take an action against a nurse and suddenly the state of Wyoming can't hire public health nurses requiring that they be licensed in the state of Wyoming? So free speech, we all love it. That's one of the things we love about living in Wyoming. But I think that you may want to take care with this bill and pump the brakes a little bit, and let's figure out exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. So with that, again, a little intense for this early after only about 4 hours of shut eye, but if I can answer any questions, I will.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, sir. Ma'am, please state your name. We'll hear your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Rachel Philbrandt. I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Board of Nursing, where we license, regulate, and discipline CNAs, LPNs, RNs, and advanced practice registered nurses here in Wyoming. As Mr. Bonenbless said, we have very little concern regarding this bill because we have not disciplined individuals for this. As he mentioned, we receive complaints daily, if not more often, or at least daily, regarding someone's speech, what they said on Facebook, what was presented via social media, and we choose not to open those complaints. So I'll just mimic what Mr. Bonenbless said, and if I can stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions of Ms. Philbrandt? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, we're going to open it up to public comment. How many want to testify on this bill? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, come on forward. We've got 3 chairs open. Good morning. If you'd state your name and we'll hear your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Jeanette Ward, and I am speaking on behalf of myself. I am in support of this bill. I'd like to remind the committee members that a federal judge in Wyoming ruled that a school board violated the First Amendment by enforcing a policy that prohibited speakers from mentioning specific individuals by name during meetings. This ruling does affirm my right to mention individuals by name. I'd like to remind Representative Yin that in April 2024, the Wyoming governor removed Dr. Eric Cuban from his position on the Wyoming Board of Medicine for speaking out against the mutilation of children in so-called gender-affirming care. This happened right here in Wyoming. This bill would have protected him if I understand it correctly. Therefore, I am in profound support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of former Representative Ward? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Good morning. Please state your name. We'll hear your testimony.
Hi, my name is Sherry Davis. I'm from Crook County. I want to thank you for bringing this legislation or this bill, hopefully soon legislation and law, forward in Wyoming. I am a healthcare provider, and there is a lot of pressure on what you can and can't say to people. I appreciate these leaders of the nursing and the doctor board coming forward and saying we have had no cases. But I don't know who's going to be on that board next week, next month, in 10 years. And we do need protection. COVID is a big beast in the room, and it was under emergency use authorization. If you know what that means, there's no coercion. So you actually can only inform and not advise. And that is not what happened. anywhere. Doctors and nurses were telling what they should do, and we didn't know. It was experimental. And there became a lot of resources out there other than what was handed down from the CDC. However, those people suffered if it wasn't in Wyoming. They were speaking out to our nation, and they have lost much in litigation for just speaking. Practicing medicine is just that. When I was a nurse and I began, people got cancer and died. They suffered for a year under treatment, and that's what happened. Now we see cancer treated with recovery and long lives to follow. Medical practitioners study hard and long to know what they know. And if they use things off-label, that's between them and their client. If you choose to drink pineapple smoothies, that's between you, your healthcare choice, and your provider. So we have that right. And so a doctor should have the freedom to work with his patient, and they decide the treatment they want. That is freedom of speech. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Wasserberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming and testifying today. Is it do you feel that usually you guys are encouraged to just kind of stay in line with what the CDC guidelines are when you're working with your clients?
Chair,
Ms.
Representative
Davis.
Wasserberger, thank you for asking. So absolutely, I actually had a sign on my vehicle against mandating vaccines, and someone, we're in a small community, privately spoke to me and said, I don't think it's right that you have that sign on your vehicle. And I said, do you think there's healthcare workers that have lost their job and cannot pay their mortgage because of their beliefs? Yeah, sure, he says. And I says, so you think as a healthcare worker, I don't have the right to have my own beliefs and values? Well, I never thought of it like that. So there's definitely an idea of how you should carry yourself and what you're allowed to or to not say as a healthcare worker. Yes, I believe that.
Additional questions, committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sir, please state your name. We'll hear your testimony.
Morning, Madam Chairman, committee members. Eric Boley with the Wyoming Hospital Association. We're not here to support or oppose this legislation, but we have had it looked at a couple of times, and I'm hoping that the sponsor of the bill would consider a friendly amendment in section 139, 125. In the definitions, it talks about governmental entities, and I think that should be state agency, which would conform with the way that the bill is drafted and address that. It's a small section right there. The other question that we have, and it's similar to what the Board of Medicine brought up, is, and this kind of feeds into what the next bill that we're going to be supporting with the international physician bill we're going to be talking about. We can't quite figure out in the context of the bill if it's saying that if there's a license suspension or I guess we're trying to figure out if this is saying that medical providers can provide practice without licenses in the state. And that obviously could create some situations. We've tried to address that in the next bill, and I know it's not germane, but it kind of is, because we're trying to figure out how to get international physicians licensed so they can practice. And we think this is saying that they don't need to be licensed if there's a situation where the Board of Medicine or one of the other state agencies takes action, which could create some situations with malpractice insurance and all kinds of other things as far as the way that hospitals, clinics, and others operate in the state. So we're just asking for clarification on that. Those are my only 2 points. I'd stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will leave that question on a Post-it, and we'll bring the bill sponsor back up in a bit. So,
Great.
thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, Mr. Caldwell, do we have any online? What's that?
Madam Chair.
One, okay. please raise your hand and Mr. Caldwell will let you in.
Hello,
Good morning.
committee.
Hey, we can-
Good morning. I appreciate you taking my testimony. Thank you all for the late night you spent and the early morning you're having again today. So I'm Sarah Penn. I'm in Fort Washakie, and currently I'm in the middle of seeing patients. So I'll try to make this quick. So I am in full support of this bill 143 to protect the free speech of healthcare providers. It was said that during COVID, there were no actions taken. And while that is true, no action was taken. No one in Wyoming, to my knowledge, lost their license for things that they said about COVID. However, when we extensively reviewed this type of issue in the past with other bills, it was said that, yes, there were, if you can call them threats made to healthcare providers. In fact, I have a letter in front of me that I will read a few lines of. This is a letter that was sent out to Wyoming physicians from the American Board of Family Medicine, Internal Medicine, Pediatrics. And what it says is providing misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine contradicts physicians' ethical and professional responsibilities, and therefore may be subject to physician disciplinary actions, including suspension or revocation of their medical license. It goes on to say that such unethical and unprofessional conduct may prompt their respective boards, which of course would be the Wyoming state boards, to take action that could put their certifications at risk. So Mr. Blunenbust was truthful in his statement. No action was actually taken. However, is a threat of loss of license or a threat of an investigation going to curb policy that they see as being less than ideal? And I would say absolutely it was. So while maybe you can't come up with a specific example of someone losing their license, we absolutely have people losing their jobs, and we did have threats of license removal. I also wanted to touch on the comment about chemotherapy versus a pineapple smoothie. While that, and he admitted, was, a little bit extreme for just demonstrating the facts. Unfortunately, we see those very things happening. The medical community poo-pooing all what they consider to be alternative therapies. Of course, chemotherapy and surgery is big in the cancer world. But unfortunately, what gets left behind are things that seems too simple to be helpful, such as diet. I personally know of more than one situation. I have a friend who had a granddaughter with brain cancer and was seen in the medical community, had all of the things, surgeries and chemos and radiations, and all of the things got to the point where they said, unfortunately, we've done all that we can do and there's nothing else that we have to offer you, and basically sent that poor child and her family home to wait out the remainder of her days while still on chemotherapy. And they also said, by the way, if you decide to go pursue any alternative therapies, you need to let us know, because we may need to stop our other treatments. And so I think there's definitely a heavy hand in those types of things, where our way is the highway and your way, because we don't understand it or haven't investigated it thoroughly, is wrong and therefore could be seen as unethical or something like that. We absolutely need this bill in place. Please vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions of former Representative Penn? Okay, seeing none, thank you for joining us this morning. Any further public comment? Okay, all right. I will close public comment. I'm going to ask the bill sponsor, Representative Ottman and Mr. Schaefer, to come forward and address the question that was left on the table. Mr. Schaefer?
Madam Chair, so I understand the one about the governmental entities, it's about the liability clause. I can look at that to be consistent, whether that's just standard language using governmental entity. I think that's fine, of course, up to the sponsor. For the more more just trying to get to the section, I think it's on page 7, and it's that subsection B, which is from lines 5 to 15. So what this is doing, the language as I read it and understand it, it's saying that, you know, state action will not support a board's punishment of free speech rights. Happy to take a look and provide further analysis and perhaps revision or clarification if that's what's desired. But it's basically saying, so if a healthcare professional is punished for protected speech that was not even medical advice, then the state should not require a doctor to be licensed by that entity. But it doesn't mean that they can do the unlicensed practice of law. It just says you can't require somebody to seek a license from an organization that's going to target protected speech that wasn't even medical advice in the first place. So that's what I understand the language to mean. But if you'd like additional language there saying, you know, unless it's remedied or whatnot, happy to consider offering the sponsor and you all language for that. But as written, I think it works, but could it be clarified? I could happily take a look at that.
Thank you. All right. Representative Clausen, you have a question of the bill sponsor, or Mr. Schaefer? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. To either one of you, Mr. Boley brought up the question of allowing physicians to practice without a license. That question came up. Do you see that as a problem in this bill?
Mr. Schaefer.
No, Madam Chair, no, it doesn't say that at all. It just says you can't force someone to be licensed by a group that's going to target your free speech rights outside of medical advice.
Further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. All right, committee. I am going to close public comments on House Bill 143. What is your pleasure? Bill has been moved by Representative Wasserberger, second by Representative Gugemas. Discussion or amendments? Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move an amendment as suggested by Mr. Boley, just to be consistent throughout the bill, changing government entity to state agency. That would be page 2, line 5. So it would read a state agency is liable instead of government entity.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the bill on page 2, line 5, removing the words governmental entity and replacing them with state agency. There has been a second by Representative Thayer. Mr. Caldwell, do you have that info? Thank you. All right, discussion on the amendment. Representative Wasserberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that would be friendly to the amendment. I would like to suggest hopefully friendly to the friendly amendment, but maybe to add a state agency or governmental entity, just in case if we start getting into, and the reason why I'm having that thought process is in the event that we get to a more federal level reach with government entities being involved in something that might be a concern for healthcare providers. But I'm very much open to hearing what other discussions people have to say about that.
Representative Clausen, is that a friendly amendment or not? Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say at this time not, just simply because the fear of a federal opinion, and we're trying to control that at the state level. I'm not sure that's something that we can do. I think right now I would like just to leave the bill consistent at state agency, and then as this bill moves forward, we should take a look and see what our options in that would be.
Any further discussion on the amendment? I have a question for you, Representative Clausen. Often state agencies contract third parties. Just curious if you've thought about that when we talk about state agencies or expanding it to any third party contract.
Madam Chair and committee, I'm trying to think of a situation where a third party contract could affect someone's license and free speech, how a third-party contract could enforce these rules. I look at this as, you know, the state agency, like the licensing board is the one that's taking action here, and I'm not sure how a third party would be involved in that.
Further discussion on the amendment? Representative Gugelmos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. What happens in the instance when a federal board, per se, like we heard in testimony, speaks to a state board and says, you need to do this or else? I'm just wondering if we shouldn't have that broader umbrella, so that maybe that would give us an avenue to fight an overreaching federal agency.
Representative Costin?
Madam Chair, I may recommend that Mr. Schaefer be available to answer that question. You know, this has been handled in, I think, 5 other states. Maybe this has been addressed there and what
Mr.
concerns
Schaefer,
would be
please
there.
come forward. Thank you. If you'd be willing to, if you have any insight on
Yes,
this
thank
question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so the way I would think of it, so states, I don't think would create the liability for the federal government. So what this is doing, this section of the code is saying just, you know, the state which have sovereign immunity is liable if they violate this right that they're recognizing here. To try to say that we are making the federal government liable for something from with state code, I'm not sure that's the way it works, but I would say that conceptually speaking, what Representative Wasberg was saying is, you know, governmental entities, any entity that is governmental here in the state, whereas if a court were to interpret state agency as just an agency of the state, so you just have to think, is there any governmental entity that is not just a state agency? So agencies being, you know, everything that is controlled by the state, okay, but like, does state agency include the executive branch and, you know, the third-party state actors that are contracted with the state? So that's why I could understand why governmental entity would be a bit broader than state agency. But again, that would just be very specific and looking through code to identify those exact entities. So yes, I do agree that making it say state entities or governmental entity would be broader and more protective. State agency would be consistent with what's limited in the bill itself, and it could be sufficient. I hope that helps, Chair.
Thank you. Representative McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the way it is and or with Representatives Wasserbergers, because we do have VA hospitals here and they are federal. So I think we should stick with government entity by itself or consider Representative Wasserberger's consideration.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, sensing the urge to vote by a voice vote and a show of hands, all those in favor of Representative Clausen's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Okay, that amendment has failed. Further amendments, further discussion on the bill. Okay, seeing no further amendments or no further discussion, question being called on House Bill 143. Mr. Caldwell, if you call the roll.
This is a roll call vote for House Bill 143. Representative Clouston,
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Aye.
Representative Heft, Representative McCann, Representative Ottman,
Aye.
Representative Thayer,
Aye.
Representative Wasserberger,
Aye.
Representative Yen has left an absentee vote of no. Chairman Rodriguez-Williams. Madam Chairman, that is 8 aye and 1 no.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Caldwell. House Bill 143 has passed committee. We will move on to the next bill, which is House Bill 129, Expanding Physician Access Act. It's now on the table for the committee's consideration. Representative Wasserberger is the bill sponsor. Good morning. Do you have a co-presenter or just yourself?
Yeah, I'll assign, I'm gonna voluntold some, presenters. I'll bring Eric Boley and Kevin. I'm so sorry. Bahamblust. I'm gonna have them come up and
Okay. Welcome.
help with
Okay,
this.
Representative Wasserberger, if you'd walk us through your bill, explain it.
Yeah, so thank you for having me considering this today. So this is a bill that we did last year. I was going to run it, and then Senator Ogden Driscoll ran a very similar bill. This bill would allow for us to have access to international physicians to be allowed to come here and practice medicine here in the state of Wyoming. As I spoke with y'all on the floor, we have a shortage expected to come of about 335 physicians by 2030. I can get the source for you if you guys would like to see that. And so basically this would be a solution, I think, for allowing us to have more for the shortage coming. It'd be a great solution for some of our places where you hear about having these healthcare deserts in parts of the state. Whether you're thinking of 10 Sleep or Lusk or Freedom, Wyoming, where you might have a very small location. I think that this would help us with being able to possibly get some doctors in those parts of the state. So we would be able to have more access to some of these healthcare providers. One of the issues that we're seeing with these areas where it might be harder to access a physician is when a doctor gets out of college, if they're paying about $300,000 after college and student loan debt, they usually are going to go to a place where there's a little bit more people to be able to pay those bills. And so to give you guys a little bit of a rundown of the bill, we're in the first few pages is just going to be an explanation of some of the stuff that we added into the bill. Last year we had a few things that we didn't have added in here. And so I worked with Eric Boley and Kevin here to add a few more things so we could have our Board of Medicine be on board with us. We added a few things like just some guardrails for doing background checks on some of these doctors, so there's a little bit less of a liability issue. And I will open it up for questions or leave you guys to the insight you have.
Madam Chairman, if I may.
Please.
Kevin Bonenblust, Executive Director of the Board of Medicine. You might recall this as being, it's kind of was born out of SF 155 from last year, which was a good starting point. A number of states have looked at doing this, and they've taken an approach a bit more robust than what Senate File 155 had, and for good reason. And so that's why we offered to help Representative Wasserberger with this language. What we want to make sure of is, for instance, competency in and fluency in medically related English. Previously, the bill said you just have to be competent in English. Well, we've seen how well that kind of requirement goes with commercial truck drivers. If you can read a children's book, they know you're qualified to drive a truck. And we wanted to make sure that we actually had somebody who communicate in medical terms to be able to talk with a patient about, and colleagues and peers about things. So also we wanted to make sure that we were able to do criminal background check, because quite honestly, when you have somebody coming from another country, you just don't know as much about them. You don't have the records. And so there have been instances where, heaven forbid, acts of terrorism have been perpetrated by physicians who'd come from other countries into places like England, Germany, et cetera. And so we wanted to at least maybe have a bit of a catch there. In addition, we felt that it was appropriate if a physician was going to be bringing another physician from out of the country into the state, there ought to be some sort of level of oversight. It shouldn't just be, hey, bring them in, turn them loose in the storefront and let them go do their thing for the next 3 years, because you want to have some sense of, are they cutting it? Are they doing it the right way? Or are they just generating bills so I can take revenue? I hate to tell you this, but we've had a medical practice here in the state that at one point, multiple locations, every single doctor that worked for them had been disciplined by the Board of Medicine. That's who they hired because they knew they could manipulate them. And so you don't want to have it where you've got somebody who's being in a task, in a job, not being monitored, not being coached, not being helped to learn the ropes in the United States system. So we built in limited supervision requirements so that there wouldn't be just, hey, bring them into the country, turn them loose for 3 years and off they go. A couple other things we did put in was that we wanted to make sure that they did pass the same licensing exam that every one of our other doctors passes. It seems only right. You know, it's your expectation that you want US doctors to pass it. Why not foreign doctors? And so then those were the main points, was just trying to get it to the point where there was a certain level of confidence for patients. And one other was to require that these physicians carry malpractice insurance. We don't have a requirement across the board for all physicians, but in the case of somebody who's really unproven, the idea was, okay, let's make sure that our patients aren't going to be going to somebody that has empty pockets, and, you know, if something goes wrong, hey, too bad, I'm from out of the country, you know. Last item was, at a lot of the bills we see in the country, there is a specification of what countries people can come from to be able to participate. We offered a suggestion on that, and in the drafting, it was modified. We'd offered a suggestion that was common to a lot of these bills, saying physicians from trained in the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, so on, countries that we have good vibe, good relationships with. The LSO changed it to say simply list approved by the Board of Medicine. So I would anticipate we would start off with a list similar to what we discussed with Representative Wasserberger. Now, will this be the cure-all? No, because it's never going to change everything from the weather in Wyoming to our patient base to everything else. We're limited by how many patients we have. We're limited. There's a lot of limits. So this is not a cure-all, but it is another tool that can be used. And I will tell you that so far it's had mixed results around the country. I would say that in about 15 states that have approved it so far, and that number is shifting. I've been told there's only about 20 physicians who are taking place in those 15 or taking part in those 15 states. So it's not a cure-all. Don't view it that way, but as another tool that can be used to recruit physicians. We tried to make it into something that's useful and protect the public. So with that, I'll answer questions or let Mr. Boley fill in the rest of the gaps from the hospital perspective.
Thank you. Mr. Boley.
Madam Chairman, committee members, Eric Boley with Wyoming Hospital Association. We took a special interest in this last year as it unfolded and went through the Senate, and it passed the Senate pretty easily, but then was never heard in the House. And after the session, we had a webinar that kind of talked about this, and there seems to be some interest in this. I think what I would share with you is I just recently saw statistics that show that within the next decade in the United States, we're going to be short over 200,000 family practice docs. And we'll also be short about 750,000 RNs. And so in looking at that and in wanting to serve our communities, we thought that this might be a bullet in the gun, an opportunity for us to potentially bring in international physicians that want to practice in the United States. But obviously, we wanted to make sure that they're well vetted and that they can be good actors here in Wyoming. And we want to make sure that the patients receive the best care. And so we also have those concerns. And I mentioned it. We have concerns about malpractice. So they would have to be able to be insurable. And I think the safety guards or the guardrails we put in place would allow us to be able to do the background checks, licensing checks that would allow us to carry that malpractice insurance. And more than likely, I can't say 100%, but more than likely, these physicians that come in will probably practice in our hospitals and might be employed by our hospitals. So it'd be the hospital's responsibility to acquire that malpractice insurance. And so I think the other thing I shared, there are a few international physicians, I believe, that are practicing in the state, not very many, but there are looks at that. I think with the rural health transformation funding that's coming forward, it might also be an opportunity because there's a large portion of that that's set aside for workforce. And this might be a great opportunity for us to help bring these folks in. President Trump's put that $100,000 price tag on anyone wanting to come in and work in that country. And I think it would be kind of hard for some of our small hospitals to pay that, to bring in an international physician. But we might be able to use those rural health transformation funds to bring these folks in and have them set up practice in our state. I think there's a lot of opportunities. So we stand in strong support of this. Again, it's not going to solve everything, but even if we can bring one or two in, it would be great. I was at the Wyoming luncheon yesterday. You guys were busy working on the floor, but I met with the new students there, and I was happy to hear that some of them are considering OB. A few of them are considering family practice, but that doesn't seem to be where a lot of our folks are going, not just in the Wyoming program, but across the country. They're looking at more specialized medicine. And so as we look at family practice and potentially OB, we're going to have to look outside the box a little bit. And I think this gives us the opportunity to do that. With that, I thank Representative Wasserberger for working with us and for bringing this bill, and I'd answer any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions of the bill sponsor? Representative Clauston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, to any of you, does this cause any considerable burden or costs to maybe the licensing board or anyone else that we haven't discussed?
Madam
Mr.
Chairman,
Butler.
Representative Clauston, there would be some cost involved, and that came up last time. We did not build that into this bill. Part of it is, and I hate to bring up the subject of the budget because I know that's not a happy one, but we do have a request for funding to update our information systems. And one of the things we could do at no added cost is if this bill passes and that appropriation is in place, we can go ahead and accommodate this in that system conversion. If, on the other hand, we don't get that supplemental appropriation, then we are going to need some additional funds to be able to implement it, because you do want to have online forms. You do want to have it where patients can look somebody up online, all those different components, and nothing comes free anymore. But at this stage of the game, assuming that we get a budget and our exception request is still in there, then we wouldn't have any additional costs we would have to ask for funding for. Thank you.
Committee, any additional questions of the bill sponsor? Representative McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know who to address this to, but I'm kind of at least have some concern about who's watching the watchers. Is mainly the mentorship program. Just want to make sure the docs that take on that are going to be appropriate, more along the lines of a fellowship or something like that. I want to make sure they're, if the guy's not up to par, that they're not afraid to say no. That's what I want to make sure of.
Mr. Bottom Bruce.
Madam Chairman, Representative McCann, great question. And that was one of the things we did add in, was that the supervising physician or sponsoring physician would have to be approved by the board, because if you have somebody who's, say, got a bad history anyway, and this is just a great way to get more billables, that may not be the best circumstance. And so to be able to say, okay, yeah, you've got a reasonable history. You've told us what your plan is for supervision. We're going to follow up and see how you're doing. Make sure you're actually supervising and making sure that this person is assimilating to the U.S. care system. So yes, that's very much an important thing we added into this. So thank you for asking that.
Representative Heft, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'll address this to any one of you. I have a constituent at home, a retired doctor, who spent a great deal of time around the country and working overseas. It's his concern that how are we going to have enough oversight to guarantee that they will continue with their education once they've been hired. It was his experience that many of these foreign doctors would come and that was it. They wouldn't do anything more and wouldn't increase their education and practice medicine with the latest modern whatever you want to call it, pardon me.
Mr. Bottomloo on continuing education.
Madam Chairman, Representative Heft, that's also a great question to bring up because the way the bill's written now, if you're not familiar with it, physicians first have their undergraduate degree, then they go to 4 years of med school or osteopathic school, and then they take postgraduate training in the form of residency. And if they complete residency, they may go on to fellowship, but that's really icing on the cake. And residencies generally run about 3 years, although neurosurgery runs, heavens, I think it's something like 6 or 7 years. We require in Wyoming that a person to be licensed in the state, fully licensed, have 2 years of accredited postgraduate training. This would provide a different opportunity, but it wouldn't say you don't have to have postgraduate training. It would still say you have to have the equivalent of US postgraduate training, but in your home jurisdiction. So it would still be, yes, you have to have the medical degree. In other countries, sometimes it's called an MBBS, Master of something in biological sciences, I think. But it's the equivalent of an MD or DO. And then you would also have to have postgraduate training that would qualify. So the idea being, and also that you've passed 2 steps of the licensing exam. So it's not as if these people are coming in really green and everything. They should have a certain portfolio they're bringing with them. This would be more of are they adapted to and assimilated in the US healthcare system and that sort of thing. So it's, the idea was we don't have to train them here. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to use that training and just make sure that they know how it works in the US, how it works in Wyoming, how it works in Lusk, for instance.
Mr. Bully?
Madam Chairman, Representative Heft, right? Did I say that right? Heft? How do you say it? Heft, okay, good. I should know that after 2 years, but I keep messing up. I would just assure you that if they're brought in and work in our hospitals, we actually budget and pay for continuing education each year and send our providers away for those things. And it's not a cheap bill because they like to go nice places and get that education, but it's part of our mission too, to make sure that they receive continuing education each year. And so as part of our staff, they would receive that benefit as well.
Committee, any additional questions? Representative McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add to that, usually even in the private sector, a lot of our contracts have that stipulation in them. I get so much time and money for seeing me every year. So that, as long as they stick with that, they're getting it because we got to do it too.
Representative Clouston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't mean to be like a representative from the middle part of our state, but I'm gonna give us a little history lesson here. So 4 years ago when I got on this committee, one of our goals was to increase provider time in the state. We thought we'd do that by decreasing administrative burden. We did the prior authorization bill and we did the credentialing bill, which really helped. And then trying to find ways of getting more providers to Wyoming because we know we have this provider shortage. So continuing to support WWAMI, starting the PA school at the University of Wyoming. Gentlemen, how do you see this bill supporting that priority that we made 4 years ago?
Mr. Bully or Representative Wasberger.
Madam Chairman and committee members, I sit on the WWAMI board. We strongly support them, but in reality, we're not producing enough providers in our country and in our state right now. I think this just enhances it. I don't think this will take away from the WWAMI program. It's not derailing any of the funding, but it's actually maybe helping us recruit those that we can't find here within the country for family practice and OB side of things.
Madam Chairman, if I might also.
Sure.
And Representative Clouston, the Board of Medicine has been licensing an expanding number of physicians. The Interstate Medical Licensure Compact had our license numbers explode. We went from licensing 350 or so docs per year to this. Now we're licensing about 1,500 docs per year. We went from having 2,400 licensed docs when I came to work for the board in 2007. We now have 8,000. But the problem is we still have about the same number who actually live in Wyoming, as far as we can tell, that have Wyoming mailing addresses. It's about 1,500, something like that. So that's where we have the problem. We're able to get physicians with specialties and everything else to, spread their practice across multiple states, including Wyoming. And that works. And we've facilitated that with things like the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, which Wyoming was the first state to adopt. But I think this is one more piece of that puzzle, which may get just the chance to bring a physician level provider into some communities where otherwise it just wouldn't quite work. And so the worst thing that happens is nothing happens. There's nobody comes, you build it, they don't come, that's it. On the other hand, to borrow from Senator Driscoll from last time, gee, if there's just one doctor that comes in, is it worth it? Well, I would suggest that with these strengthened bills, with the strengthened bill, it is worth it because you're going to be making sure you're getting the right people. And then at that point, what is one more physician in a small town in Wyoming worth? Basically at no cost to the state, by the way. So it's not a silver bullet. It's not even close to a silver bullet, but is it part of your toolbox? Yes, I would say so. And I'm not advocating or opposing. I'm just saying, I think that's part of your toolbox then.
Follow-up, Representative Clauston.
Thank you. So just a quick question that you just kind of mentioned. So we're increasing all these licenses to the state of Wyoming, but they're not coming here to practice. Are they doing telemedicine? Are these physicians that are doing consulting work for insurance companies? Why is there such an increase in number, but they're not actually coming to Wyoming?
Mr. Bottom.
Madam Chairman, Representative Clauston, it's one of all of the above answers. That, one of the things that came about with COVID that was good was we had a move to an acceptance of telehealth. I said for years, you had to have a number of people, a number of acceptances. You had to have patients agree to it. You had to have providers agree to it. You had to have payers agree to it. And those things were all going in different directions right up until COVID. And everybody said, hey, we can't have patients going out to see docs, but we need medical care. How can we do this? And everything from schools to healthcare went online. And payers said, okay, we'll pay for this now. And they found out it wasn't as bad as they feared it might be. Patients found out that they really didn't have such a bad experience with their providers if they did telehealth. And providers went, I can do a pretty good job of certain things with telehealth. And so let's keep going. So telehealth has been a big one. Then in addition, there's also what they call locum tenens or temporary fills, where let's say the one OB-GYN in a community is getting ready to move and leave. Well, they need somebody to fill and they haven't gotten a permanent person yet. They bring in a temporary, a locum tenens physician to cover that. And that person gets licensed. They're here for a while. They don't move to Wyoming permanently. Another example is, telehealth, teleradiology. The vast majority of our physicians who provide radiology or pathology, or now dermatology as well, aren't in the state, but they provide active care, active reads, things like that. So there's a lot of that. We do have a few people to get the license because they have a ski lodge or ski condo in Jackson, and they want to be able to write scripts when they're in Jackson. There's a few of those, but the one thing we haven't been able to overcome is just the sheer numbers of people in our communities. There's no more people really than there were before. And so that makes the economics harder to come in and permanently move in. And then also we have yet to figure out how to make the winters more palatable for spouses and things like that, quite honestly. I mean, you might get a physician to come in for the first year, but if you can get the spouse to stay for the second winter, then you've got something. And so I think there's a lot of that churn happens as well. So we could go on for days on discussing that, but that's a lot of what's going on.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there any government agencies that want to testify on House Bill 129? All right, are there any members of the public that would like to come forward to testify? Come on up. Good morning and welcome. If you'd state your name and we'll hear your testimony.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Darty, and I'm representing Cicero Action today. Before I begin, I do want to sincerely thank this body. I tried to stay up until the bitter end and in solidarity watched last night. I did fall asleep about 10:30, woke up and the YouTube had changed to some sort of dance performance and I thought the legislature had completely lost it and were dance fighting. So, but thankfully, you guys got through much of your work last night, but I do know the amount of effort you put in, and I do appreciate each and every one of you for the amount of effort you put in on our behalf. That said, I want to thank you for considering this bill again this year. It enjoyed some of the strongest introduction support of most of the bills that your body saw this year. And we worked on this last year. I will say it is remarkably better this year. Because we had the good folks from the hospital and the licensing board and the gentleman to my left here. And I think this bill is much better this year. Madam Chair, you'll be delighted. I don't need to touch on most of my points because the previous speakers already touched on them. I will say one point that struck me that hasn't been mentioned yet so far is the residency slots. One of the things I like about this bill is it frees up residency slots because in the current configuration, it's my understanding that they have to go through those residency slots. But as a result of this, those are free for U.S. medical students going forward. And I think that's a good outcome of this bill. Yeah, like I say, Madam Chair, looking through this, it looks like that most of the points that I'd prepared for this morning have been covered. So I'll just leave you with, I think this is a smart measured Wyoming-specific bill that about 18 other states have also implemented, and I think it'll be a good tool to have in Wyoming's toolbox. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions of Mr. Daugherty? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Sir, please state your name and we'll hear your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Tyler Lindholm. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in the Cowboy State. I just wanted to talk about the fact that this isn't really a pie in the sky kind of legislation where we could attract doctors. This is actually already kind of a thing. My doctor is a foreign trained doctor. He grew up here in the Cowboy State. He's a child of Wyoming. But when he was seeking higher education and going forth, he came to the realization that the way it works in the state of Wyoming, residency slots are actually capped in the United States. For what reason, we don't know. I keep asking everybody that I can find, why do we cap these? You'd figure we'd want more. And nobody really knows. So anyways, he went off to Australia, and that's where he finished off his degree work and went through his residency. When he came back to the state of Wyoming, he had to redo his residency because this law was not in place. Last year, he testified in favor of this legislation. I don't know if he's online right now and planning on testifying, but he's a fantastic doctor. He's really saved our bacon up in Crook County, Wyoming. As you can probably guess, we're not overflowing with doctors. He's our only doctor in all of Crook County. We have plenty of nurse practitioners and physician assistants, but he's our only actual physician left in Crook County. And he was foreign trained, but he is a child of Wyoming. So that's an opportunity that maybe some Wyoming kids may be able to take advantage of because of this legislation passing. And it might be an easier ride for them than it was for him. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for both for joining us. Any further public comment? Anybody online, Mr. Caldwell? Okay, I will close public comment on House Bill 129. Committee, what is your pleasure? The bill has been moved by Representative Thayer, second by Representative Clouston. Discussion and amendments. Representative Thayer.
Thank you. Not a question, just a statement. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to commend the bringer of this bill and working with Wyoming Hospital and the Board of Medicine. You know, I keep saying we're a maternity desert in my district, but really we are a provider desert. And I just think these tools and resources and thinking outside the box with guardrails and making sure we're keeping our Wyoming people safe is always number one. So I want to thank you all working together from last year's bill, Senate File 155, and bringing House Bill 129. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any amendments or further discussion on the bill? question being called. Mr. Caldwell, if you'd call the roll on House Bill 129.
This is a roll call vote for House Bill 129. Representative Clausen,
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Aye.
Representative Heft,
Aye.
Representative McCann,
Aye.
Representative Ottman,
Aye.
Representative Thayer,
Aye.
Representative Wasserberger,
Aye.
Representative Yen,
Aye.
Chairman Rodriguez Williams. That was an aye, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, that is 9 ayes.
Okay, House Bill 129 has passed committee. We have no further business on the agenda, so this meeting is adjourned.